People will talk. Okay, so here we are on Calle Maratin. We're just about to walk into the Secret Kingdoms bookshop to do an interview with David Price, who's very kindly giving some of his time on a very busy Monday afternoon to chat to us about his bookshop and everything. Before we go in, the name of the street is named after a Spanish writer.
That's right.
Great insight, thank you so much. So let's just keep walking down the street. This is obviously the first time we've done this actually on the street. No, it's actually the second time.
Walking into a place?
No, but like recording while we're walking.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Not walking into a place in general. We've done that quite a few times in our lives.
We've been to bookshops. So here we are, just outside. We want to comment as well. Yeah. We'll ask David about this. There's a beautiful facade. So for people who know us, we have a tour of La PS where we talk about the old facades of the shops there as well. So that's something that we definitely have to pick his brain about. But it's a beautiful black framed building. Very elegant, and I think, well, if you're ready, we'll walk through the sacred door.
We'll surprise him.
He doesn't know we're coming. So here we are. So walking into the shop, books elegantly placed all around the place. And David, I think you're waiting with bated breath for our interview to begin. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Welcome to the Secret Kingdoms, guys.
It's our pleasure to be here. So, David, this bookshop has only been open for around 4 months, but you've done so well with it. You have events, you had the British ambassador opening it as well. How have you managed to turn this into such an amazing place in such a short space of time?
Well, that's a very kind question. A little bit of preparation always helps. And the dream of opening this bookshop's been high on our minds since November of last year. Okay. I actually rode the Camino de Santiago while thinking about what to do next at a moment of change in my life. So from November through to June, I was very busy learning about what a bookshop is, how to run a bookshop, and starting to get to know the literary community in Madrid. And it was in fact one of those who introduced me to the ambassador, and another person who got in touch as I began to talk about what I was going to do on social media, who put us in touch with Giles Tremlett for the opening event with Giles Tremlett. And it's really been a matter of the friendliness and community of the literary gang in Madrid that's helped to drive the bookshop forward.
Because apart from selling books and having events, you have the Madrid Writers Group based here as well, don't you?
That's right. Every Tuesday evening, the Madrid Writers Critique Group meets here at around 7:30. And we get together around the table in the back room and put the world to rights, or more particularly talk about our writing dreams and ambitions. There's usually a theme for the evening, and then we sit down very quietly and write for 20 minutes and perhaps talk a little bit about what we've written.
Okay, so you're also participating in the writing group as well. So you're writing every week as well.
Oh, yes, I've always been a dreamer. The dream of the bookshop's been in the back of my mind for 33 corporate years, so I'm very happy that that's finally come to fruition. And I'm also a frustrated novelist and short story writer. I've got 2 half-finished novels, which I suspect will never be completed, and half a dozen short pieces of text, most recently writing about travel.
Oh, that's amazing. That's quite surprising. We didn't know that. That's nice. So, but you've got a background in banking, I think you told us. So you used to work in a bank, or?
Yes.
So how did you
How did that begin?
Yes.
Yes, well, I didn't intend to go and work for a bank. I don't think it's anyone's childhood dream. In fact, opening a bookshop has always been in the back of my mind, even since childhood. But my dad, who very wise, sensible, grown-up bloke, when told that his eldest son wanted to go off and open a bookshop or run his own business, looked at me in my 17-year-old idealism with mild horror and said, "Son, it's all very well you wanting to go off and run a business, and you know I'll always support you, but it would be a good idea to know something about money first." And he said, "The people who know about money work in banks. Go and work in a bank for a bit, and when you're ready, you'll be ready."
Sage advice. Well, we can see you. We're recording in a live, active bookshop here. You have a potential customer here, so we'll take a quick pause here. We'll come back with more questions in a moment.
Okay, speak shortly.
And you got the same category out there as second-hand? Or?
Pretty much the same categories. Yeah, we've got historical novels, romance, sci-fi, quite a big police and suspense section. The literary section is much smaller at the moment.
So don't worry, if someone comes in, we'll pause, no problem.
I know that's fine.
Yeah.
It's only really popping across to see if we can help at all, as people do.
Oh, no worries, we don't want to deprive you of any customers.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, you wanted to ask a question?
I've got a lot of questions. No, we were just talking before you were talking to the customer. We were talking about how your dad advised you to have a career in banking before.
Yes.
But
About money. I'm not sure I really did, but that was the idea anyway.
Yeah. Well, I suppose that's kind of like the usual advice from parents. So get a degree and
Sensible advice.
But in your case, it's worked out really well because obviously now you are running the business and are running it well. So, but was it really hard to get to this point because obviously you've worked a lot of years, no?
A couple of thoughts on that one. I did work for a lot of years in the bank. What was perhaps going to be 2 or 3 years turned into, give or take, 33 years, which is a little longer. And they say life is what happens while you're busy making other plans. And of course, I started work in the UK. It may be hard to tell from my accent now, but I'm originally from the UK. And I actually came out with the bank as then was in 1998. I'd never been to Spain before. My boss more or less dragged me kicking and screaming over here, promising me it would be a year or maybe 2 years. And then, of course, I met Beatriz, my Spanish wife. And as things do, everything changed at that point. So from 1998 onwards, I've been here. I've had children, the responsibilities of father, children growing up, now starting to go off to university. And perhaps by serendipity, if you like, with that change in life coming along, and after many, many years in the bank, the long career in the bank drew to a close in November. And that's what gave me the freedom and the opportunity to set out and follow this dream.
Just want to ask you about being an expat in Spain. So, how was that transition for you? And you've obviously taken to Spanish life because you're living here still. So I guess
I was very, very fortunate in the way the expat transition worked for me because I came out with a pre-existing team of people of similar age in an existing department. So I had a ready-made gang of English friends. But I was doubly fortunate in that half of the team decided to stay in the UK. So it was backfilled with planners and accountants and other such boring stuff of very, very nice Spanish people. So we immediately had a kind of 50-50 team in the working environment. And my bosses at the time, it was perhaps a different era in terms of perks, also gave me a 1 hour free Spanish class every morning, which helped me to settle in as well, although I was really not very good at it and going very slowly, which is why one of my colleagues said, I have a friend from university and she'd really like to improve her English. Why don't you do what they call an intercambiar with her? So I did, and we were married 18 months later.
Wow, that's quite a story. Very nice. Okay, so basically, can you describe to us a little bit, the bookshop? Obviously, listeners cannot see it at the moment. We've commented a bit on when we were walking in, its character, but what is the philosophy behind the Secret Kingdom? It's such a mysterious kind of name.
Sure, well, to start with the name, we were originally planning to call it the Small Kingdom. But you have to register your business name here in Spain, as I'm sure you do everywhere. And we found that had already been registered by a children's clothes shop. So we had to think again. And one of the little gang of us who were getting together to work things out said, well, why not Secret Kingdoms? And we all said, that would actually be better than Small Kingdoms anyway. Because, of course, Secret Kingdom adds that whole idea of the mysterious kingdom that you enter when you read a book, and the mysterious kingdom that the writer has been writing when he wrote the book. And they're never quite the same kingdom, and they're never even quite the same kingdom for two people reading the same book. Mm-hmm. They only become the same when you see them on the telly, which is why I always recommend read the book before you see it on the telly. So that's, if you like, the philosophy behind the name. The store itself, we were very lucky, really. We looked at quite a lot of shops in Lavapiés, in La Latina, in Barrio de las Letras, the literary quarter where we are now. But they all tended to be expensive or have planning difficulties. Quite a common thing, which tripped us up on the last previous place, is something called an aseo invasivo, or an invasive toilet. in that the old buildings in Madrid were normally built with communal toilets on each balcony for the people in the flats, and the shops didn't have toilets at all. They would just pop into the main staircase and go to one of the communal toilets. Of course, that changed when every flat got their own individual toilets in the 1940s and 1950s, leaving the poor old shopkeeper rather crossing his legs. So what they tended to do would be to dig a hole in the patio just behind the shop and connect up to the main drain that way. What they didn't tend to do was to write to the local government where their building plans are held and tell them what they were doing, which means that when a new person takes over a shop these days and wants to do all the paperwork, which I did, I've done all the paperwork, or may or may not come onto that, they can get into planning trouble because there's what's called an invasive toilet, and that can take an enormous amount of time, months and leg crossing to sort out. So the previous place I looked at fell through because of the invasive toilet problem. But I'm pleased to say that one cold, slightly depressing evening in February this year, we were walking around a very rainy Barrio de Letras when my wife spotted a hand-drawn to let sign on one of the roller lines of what was then an abandoned, dusty yoga salon and is today the Secret Kingdoms.
I really like as well on your website you have, what's the slogan, Readers United?
Yes. There are all sorts of history and reasons behind that. But the idea fundamentally is one of community. When we were planning the shop and starting to make the philosophy of it come alive, if you like, it was very important to us to join in a lot of the literary groups in Madrid. We talked about the Writers' Forum already and book clubs and so on. And the idea that there is a community of readers, that we're doing something quite special when we're reading. We're not just all lost in our own secret kingdom, but we're in a very strong, ongoing, shared experience of all the people who read the novels and compare that experience with the writer. And it's that sense of the unity of readers that we wanted to get across with the Readers United tag.
And why do you think this is the first bookshop that's exclusively selling English language books?
That's a very good question. I'm hesitating slightly as I answer that. It's a line that we have used, that we are the only 100% English bookshop selling new and used books in Madrid. It's a little bit of a mouthful, and it's a mouthful because it has to be accurate. There are some very good bookshops that have a degree of English specialisation in Madrid. There's Desperate Literature, just on Calle Campomanes near Plaza de Opera, that has a really well-curated selection of new and used books in English mainly, but also Spanish, German and French. There's Paisajes International Bookshop at the top of Geneva, which has a lovely English cave downstairs. And then, of course, there's good old J&J Books and Coffee, which has, I hear, the best bagels in Madrid and a nice second-hand selection downstairs. They are only second-hand books there, though.
But I still want to ask a question about the shop because of the sign.
Just let it go.
Well, no, it's just because we picked on this. Obviously, listeners will know that we have a tour that looks at the old facades in Lavapiés. We're running for several years. Yeah, it's sort of we had a bit of a break for the pandemic, but yeah, we've run it for a long time, and we just. It all started with a book, in fairness, because I had a book of like old signs in Madrid, and then we just went looking for them and trying to find which ones were still there. And this shop has an old sign. It's a sign
Was this shop in the book of old signs?
It wasn't actually. No, otherwise I would have told you already. Yes, that's a fundamental fact. But it reminded us, it's something that we instinctively pick up on. And we were curious about that, whether you were, because we read a lot when we were preparing the tour about the history of the signs, and we were wondering whether, you had to keep it or you kept it because you liked it.
Yes, the story about the sign. If you stand outside the Secret Kingdoms bookshop, it says Secret Kingdoms very firmly on the roller blinds, and there is a little flag saying Secret Kingdoms as well. But the sign above the shop, which is in a beautiful mix of wood and black glass and silver, says Ismael Guarma, Juegos Mesas de Billares y Juegos de Casino, so billiard tables or pool tables and casino games. And it says that because it's protected. It has to say that. Were I to try and change that, I would have to do a huge process with the local government, recreate exactly the same materials and words, and it would probably be cheaper and easier just to change my name to Ishmael Guama and sell billiard tables. But there's history to that, of course. I mean, the room we're standing in now used to be the pool table showroom, and it would have had casino wheels spinning merrily around the room, although no one gambling, I'm sure. And then if we go through to the room at the back, if you look up at the ceiling here, you can see a long shaft with big wooden wheels on it, which we've preserved.
Yeah.
Now, once upon a time, those big wooden wheels would have had leather belts going down from them to planing machines, to saws and other factory equipment for making billiard tables and
This is something else we
casino
picked up on.
games.
The other day we're like, what is that?
Well, there it is. There would perhaps have been a steam engine, or perhaps more recently a diesel engine, and this was the place where Ishmael Guama's fine billiard tables were made. And if you look hard in Wanapop, very, very occasionally, you'll see one of his products come up. We saw one come up, but it was a little too expensive to buy to have in the bookshop, although we would have liked to.
Fascinating stuff. So we were learning a little bit about the mythology of the bookshop, your background, also your writing aspirations. But maybe we can ask you now who your inspirations are when it comes to literature. Who are your writers that you always go to?
Oh gosh, yes, yes. There are so many. The book that I've most enjoyed recently and I felt most inspired by reading was Marguerite Yourcenar's, if I pronounced that correctly, Memoirs of Hadrian. Which is an extraordinary story written by a French lady, one of the first LGB writers to break through, off the coast of Maine in the 1940s and 1950s, although she'd been planning the book all her life. It's an extraordinary exercise in sustained empathy, as the reviewer put it. What she's essentially done is get inside the mind of the Emperor Hadrian, at a time when people lived in a very, very different world from our own, but perhaps in a time where there were great similarities with our own world as well, in the sense that the old gods were dying and the new gods had not yet been born. So people were paying lip service to paganism at the time, but didn't really believe it. And the strength and the fire and the passion and belief of Christianity had not yet arrived. So it was a very agnostic world, if I can put it that way. Within that context, Hadrian was one of the first great philosopher emperors. Indeed, the whole book is couched as a series of letters to his successor, but one, Marcus Aurelius, who of course became the most famous of the philosopher emperors, in which Hadrian outlines why he took a path of peace after so many warlike emperors, what he believes it means to be human, and how he tried to reflect that in the way he governed the empire and in his own life as well. And it's an extraordinary book, and the English is beautifully written as well. One factor may well have been that the translator, as well as being a professional translator, was Marguerite's lover throughout the time that the book was being written, which would have given her own special insights, I'm sure. It's such a book that on the strength of this one book, as I understand it, Marguerite became the first female member of the Académie Française, breaking through a glass ceiling that had been in place for far too long.
Wow, so you sell it very well, so obviously
Yes,
fittingly for your...
10 copies in the bookshop so far, I think.
Oh, very interesting. Okay, so yeah, you've told us, how you had this dream for long, and then, well, so far it succeeded, and you're very happy with it. What advice would you give to other people that want to follow the dream, and other than learning, for example, finances?
Yes,
which
well,
is good
finances.
advice.
I don't know if I learned finances well enough, really. It's far too early to know if this place will be a success financially or not, but that's the gamble you take when you step in. I was very fortunate when the bank did decide to get rid of me. They gave me just about enough to have the capital to set the place up and run. Advice on following your dreams. It's never a bad thing to follow your dreams, even if they may or may not turn out successfully. There's nothing worse than looking back at the end of your life and saying, if only. I mentioned that when I finished my job, or the job finished with me, I went for a ride on the Camino de Santiago and had a very hard think and a prayer while doing so about what should I be doing next and what does it mean in terms of my responsibilities? I didn't come to a conclusion then, but I came back and talked to Beatrice and said, I've thought very hard about trying to do something else in banking, doing a bit of consulting, doing a bit of project work. And they don't really appeal. And what I'd really like to do, the dream would be to open the bookshop. And she looked at me very hard and said, if not now, when? And I am into my 50s. If I had gone off and gone into another bank or done some consulting or something like that, then the bookshop would probably never have happened. And I think perhaps the worst thing that you can have at the end of your life is undue regret, which is why I'm here today.
And you're here talking to us in the podcast, David, so thank you so much for all your insights and for welcoming us here for Maria's event in November. We're also here last weekend for Dr. Chris's event also last weekend, so we've had a great time here on different occasions.
Forward to that. Very grateful for Maria for the work that she did interviewing Chris Norton on Egyptology. Maria's own background in archaeology and ethnoarchaeology was extremely useful in putting together a really lively and fascinating event. And Chris has written back since saying how much he enjoyed it, and everybody who was there obviously had a good time. I'm very much looking forward to welcoming you back on the 17th of November to talk about the stuff of life, and I'm sure we'll have just as good an event, if not a better one, that day.
We'll put your website into the description where our listeners can, if they're in Madrid, they can check out the forthcoming events and also the selection of books you have also.
Brilliant. And I would be delighted if they would like to reserve a ticket to this free event and perhaps get a second-hand book while they're doing so.
Great. Well, that was great. Thank you so much, David. We really enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
So we're just back on Calle Marathon, very close to actually where we actually do our Lavapiés tour as well with the Farmacia del Globo. You always pull a face there, I think, when I say Calle Marathon. Maybe I'm not saying it properly.
Moratin.
Yeah, Maratin. Maybe the tilde over the I, of course.
I never pull a face when you're pronouncing.
So it was a great interview. I can't believe you spent so much money on books there, though. You dropped like, what, $1,000?
Yeah, there are never too many books.
Well, that's the end of another exciting episode of the People Will Talk podcast. Find us on all our socials, which you'll find in the description. And this is me from Calle Maratin saying goodbye and good luck.
I'm saying bye.